Hello Exiles, and welcome to my channel. This is Fusion Gaming, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be discussing Affliction League 3.23. Now, as you can see from the footage here in the background, this is from the content reveal, and it looks quite to be a pretty awesome league in respects of new content and everything that's just been added into the game. So if you are new to the channel, then welcome to the channel. If you want to go and check out any of my other videos, I have been doing quite a few little guides recently on how to choose maps, how to go through the axe, how to do the chaos recipe, basic guides on path of building, everything like that. So if you want to go back to the channel, subscribe and go and have a look at some content after you've watched this video, then you're more than happy to. And obviously I thank you for your support in watching this video. So today's video, we're literally just going to quickly run through all of the new content that's going to be added into the game in terms of just related to Affliction. We're not going to go through Ultimatum. I'm going to save that for a further video. What we're going to do today is we're going to go very quickly and go through the content that's been added in via the Affliction League, because going forward, Ultimatum, as you can see on screen right now, is going core, whereas the Affliction League is only going to be a temporary league and will only last potentially for the next 3 months. So let's dive straight in. So the first thing that you will do is, as soon as you put your maps, this I believe that we will start to encounter these zones, I would assume during the axe, and from what Mark says, that obviously you will be beckoned to enter a overgrown passageway that looks like the one on screen, and there are what's called sacred wisps. Now, when you enter the sacred wisps, they then take you to what's called the Viridian Wildwood. Now, this entire forest has been covered in some form of vile affliction, and obviously its foreboding darkness surrounds everything. Now, as you run through the forest, the wisps will then burn away the actual affliction, as you can see the little bugs on screen. But obviously, as you can imagine, in a forest is going to be filled with monsters. Now, these wisps that you will encounter will only have a limited amount of power, and there are various different types of wisps, as you can see on screen here. There are primal, wild, and vivid. So as you collect these wisps, you will obviously encounter bosses, you will encounter rare monsters, and you will encounter various other beasts and things in there. Now, obviously from the video, he does say that the wisps only have a certain amount of power, and obviously once that power ends, what will then happen is it will then return you back to your area, your zone, the axe, the map, whatever it is that you are doing. And what will happen is all of the wisps that you've collected, the primal, the wild, and the vivid, will then disperse into the environment, and they will then randomly inhabit monsters within your map, making them stronger and harder, but also more rewarding. Now, they can also encounter map bosses, as it shows right here, but what it can do is it can encounter all 3 of them. So you could potentially have a primal, wild, vivid boss, which I'm assuming is going to be very similar to the likes of an arch nemesis boss, which we used to encounter around about 1.5 years ago. Now, as it says on screen here, the blue wisps provide item rarity, the purple wisps provide item quantity, and the yellow wisps provide currency. So I would assume if you was focusing on the yellow side, then you would get a lot more currency drops than anything else. And if you was to get the rarity up as well and the quant, then that would obviously help. Now, as you're venturing through the wildwood, you will obviously bump into the Azmeri, and you will bump into these 3 different Azmeri travelers that were stuck in the woods, and they will then provide you with the option to then select an Ascendancy. So as you can see on screen, there are 3 Ascendancies. You have the Warden of the Magi, a Warlock of the Mists, and a Wildwood Primalist. Now, just to quickly run through this, the Warden of the Magi, because I'm not going to run through every single one of them, the Warden of the Magi that he's on right now will provide you with Tinctures, which are things that you can add to your weapons that will then add special effects. What I mean by that is it will then potentially stun them on full health. I'm sure I've seen a tincture that provides Culling Strike, and I've also seen a tincture that will cover them in ash for every hit that you do. For the Wildwood Primalist, this one will provide you with a war cry that opens all nearby chests. It will provide you with a backpack, So you have another 20 slots to be able to return items back, which is always going to be good when you're farming maps. And it then also has a further 3 slots of your Ascendancy, which are empty. Now what you can do is you can provide and you can buy charms from this Primalist, so from this Azmeri. You will be able to buy certain charms which you can then input into your character, at which point then you can then basically create your own hybrid Ascendancy. Now we're not going to go through this entire video, but there is an example of the Tinctures. Obviously this one applies a debuff and obviously can potentially steal frenzy charges, and that is the shop for the Tinctures. Now one thing to be made aware of here, for the Tinctures, they have advised and they have come back and they have said that the colours for them will be that the Primal Wisps, which are the blue one, will actually be for the Primal Huntress, and that has recently changed. So these are the Primals. Now as you can see here, these are the blue ones, but on here we have Tinctures. This is now wrong. And just to confirm this, so you don't think I'm just making this up, this is a post that was made by Grinding Gear Games on the 5th of December here, and which is where they eventually state that Primal Wisps will be used to purchase charms, Wild Wisps will be used to purchase corpses, and Vivid Wisps will be used to purchase Tinctures. So first things first, if you are wanting to run through the axe a little bit quicker and you want to pick up the movement speed, then obviously you want to go for the Tinctures guy. Then you want to be heading for the Vivid Wisps, which will be the yellow Wisps. That's the first thing that you want to do. So if you want to pick up that 30% movement speed buff, which I will show you in a minute, then that is something that you will want to do. Now they do quite clearly state here that obviously in the content reveal that was different. These are the colours, so they are the same names as the Harvest Juice. So Primal's blue, Wild is pink, Yellow is Vivid. Not just basically so that everyone who's obviously already aware of the names based on Harvest to make it a little bit easier. Now in terms of that movement speed buff that I was telling you about that you would want to try and get in the axe, this node right here, Mark did mention that within the axe, the Azmeri will send you on quests to do specific tasks, and in doing so they will then reward you with 2 points. These first 2 points, I would recommend that you throw them straight into these 2 points and pick up this Oath of the Magi. If you read the last node, it says 30% increased movement speed if you have boots, but you have no socketed gems. So what I would advise that you do is that you pick this up, and if you combine that then potentially with your boots, and if you randomly manage to pick up a set of boots in the axe that have got either from 10 to another 30% or 20% movement speed, then you will be rocking through the axe with another 50% movement speed. And if by some miracle you also manage to pick up a Chiari ward, that will then provide you with another 10% movement speed. So this is a massive buff in terms of running through the axe and the speed, and I feel that with this buff we will see a new record and a new speed record in terms of running through the axe in a new fastest time. Now with this guy, obviously you can do Tinctures, but he also provides flask effects as it shows here, 30% increased flask effect with any adjacent Tinctures, or sorry, any adjacent flasks. So as you can see in his inventory down here, he has 2 Tinctures on either side, which then would provide a 30% increased effect to all potentially the flasks that are on the left and on the right of this flask. So utilization of the Tinctures would be the best, and I think when running, if you was to be running a mage build, let's say by end league, if you was to have a Tincture in the middle of 2 of your most valuable and the best flasks that you have, then you potentially would be able to boost your damage potentially even more, or potentially your rarity. You could even potentially run it on a gold flask and increase the magic find potential on your build, increase the rarity, things like that. The next guy that you have is the Warlock of the Mist. This guy is mainly based around minions and curses from what I can gather. Now obviously there's a thing on here to do with the Ravenous skill where you can then consume a corpse depending on what type of corpse it is, and you can then take less damage from that monster, but also do more damage to them. Obviously, he goes on to explain here that you could potentially inhabit and take on a Eldritch corpse, which will then mean that you can then take on any Eldritch bosses and do a little bit more damage to them. There is also a potential for Spectres in here, where you could potentially Spectre any of these corpses, but in the Q&A that Mark did mention later on in the reveal, he does mention that this one that you can see on screen right now, which is a Spectre of the Hydra, the Shaper boss, that they are quite squishy and they are quite weak, because as you can imagine, they are very, very strong in damage. He goes on to mention here in respects of curses that there is a potential curse here that which will put a damage over time, but it explodes. Sorry, when your zombies, or your minions, I'll go back to that. When your zombies are low on life, they will then explode, doing massive amounts of damage around them. There is a curse that he says that you can put on a boss, and when it gets to the end of the duration of the curse, they deal no damage. As you can see here, he's just tanking the beam. And then there is a third curse in which he says that once you hit an enemy or you do any form of debuff effect, it then spawns phantasms which will then come and fight you, which potentially could be more monsters. And the way that I see that is if anyone played Sentinel League, where you could press your blue Sentinel and then you could then incorporate more monsters into your map. That's how I see it. Because imagine if you have 50 monsters and you hit all of them, but you don't kill them, and that then makes them all spawn 3 phantasms. That means that 50 times 3, you've now got another 150 mobs on screen now. You've now got potential nearly 250 mobs on screen that you can then kill. Now, I don't know, he wasn't very clear in the reveal whether these phantasms drop any loot, but I could very surely imagine that they do. So that potentially is then adding more pack size to your maps inherently. And the last one is the Primalist, Wildwood Primalist, which I've said is your own, basically DIY, make your own Ascendancy, where the first thing you can do is you can buy these charms, and obviously with these charms this one provides Onslaught and provides Flask charges, and you can then socket them straight into your tree. Now you can mix and match, so if you wanted that one that he's just socketed and you wanted this one with the melee and the movement speed, and let's say you wanted another one which was in the shop later on, which had plus one power charge and +1 frenzy charge. I think that was what we saw. It was at the bottom of this list here. It's the last one that he shows. No, +1 power and +1 endurance. So imagine you was to run that on a power stacking build. Now, I'm not too sure whether you can run 2 of these at the same time, because it doesn't say on there whether you can run more than 1. But imagine you could run 3 of them. So you'd have an extra 3 power charges and an extra 3 endurance charges. I think that would be ridiculous in terms of the amount of damage that you could have, but you would lose a little bit of utility, that I would think. There is also a bit of a meme bit on the Ascendancy, and the fact that war cries here can potentially get monsters to drop another item, and they can also open all the chests. So for anyone running Blight, that is a godsend. Now, in terms of the entire league itself, there's the little backpack that I was talking about, the extra 20 spaces. That in itself is pretty cool. But the league itself, in terms of Affliction, it is sounding to be very, very juicy. More to the fact that I feel that if you was to run through there for a long time and collect the rarity and quantity wisps, and then pick up some currency wisps, and maybe some of them would combine, then as you can imagine, the magic finders would obviously be in for a hell of a treat with some of the drops that they would get. So it's one of them going to be leagues where we're going to have to do a bit of trial and error. I'm going to stop the video there because it's about to start going into ultimatum, and I'm not going to go through that. But in terms of the league itself, it looks quite fun. It's something that we've never experienced before. We've never needed to do this. I do remember Mark saying that it is an endless procedurally generated forest, so there is no end to the forest. But the main task that we do need to do, that the Azmeri is asking us to do, is we do need to kill the King in the Mists. Now, I am a bit unsure as to who the King of the Mists is. There is speculation in watching the trailer whether we feel that the King of the Mists is is the guy that we saw chanting in front of, whether it's this guy here who looks very similar to someone that you would see in Stranger Things. He does look very Stranger Things-esque when I saw him. If you think about him, I think it's in season 3, this looks like the dude that the Mind Flayer that took over the big siege of the Star Core in season 3. But there are also assumptions that maybe this guy is the King of the Mists, this lovely guy that gives us a nice funny look. There is speculation that it could be this guy because he looks quite strong, and he also just disappears into a pile of bugs on the floor, which looks quite fun if you was attacking him and he would then disappear into bugs and you couldn't see him. So this is all obviously speculation, but we will have to wait and see. League launches is in 3 days time. I cannot wait, and I hope that you will join us in the launch on Friday. It's going to be launching 3 hours earlier for anyone else who is aware, so just be warned that obviously if you're usually used to the usual launch times, it is going to be 3 hours earlier this time. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So for me, usually in the UK, the launch time doesn't usually happen till roughly 9 PM or 10 PM at night, whereas this league, it's starting at 7, so it's 3 hours earlier, which is going to be awesome for me, because then that means that I could potentially get to maps and get a lot further than I would typically do on my first night. Because what I would usually do on my first night is I would usually try and get to Act 5, go to bed, stop, and then get up in the morning and then crack on, so that I wasn't absolutely shattered. And I would then crack on all the way through Saturday, Sunday, and I booked off Monday, so we have an extra day, and I'm going to try and see if we can get to whole map completion and see what we can do by Monday. But that's all the fun and games we have to come. So I will leave the video there. Any comments, any questions that you may have, you can always go and watch this reveal video that is posted on the official Path of Exile channel, or you can post a comment into the video of this video. You can post a comment and I will reply to you if you have any questions. Until we meet again, thank you for watching, stay sane, Exile, and I appreciate your time.